Please watch the video until the end to feel the full depth of this story.
Chapter 1. De era evil.
He arrived with a small suitcase and a head full of sentences. The narrator, a man who had observed lovers and failures with the patience of someone who had worked in theaters and cafes, remembered the moment as if it were a scene under warm light. The young writer Matteo stepped off the train into a town that smelled of rosemary and sunbaked stone. He was not yet a man hardened by disappointment. He still believed in the neatness of plot and the certainty of punctuation. He had come to write a play that would become a memory for others, a story to root someone's heart. Matteo rented a room above a market where old women sold figs and fishermen mended nets. At dusk, he would walk the vineyards on the edge of town, notebook in hand, listening to the wind rearrange words. That summer there was talk of a festival and a rehearsal troupe passing through. Actors who carried stories like currency, spending them on every stage between markets and chapels. The narrator, a man who knew how life gathers people like bunches of grapes, watched as Matteo's curiosity drew him to that transient company.
Chapter 2. A meeting among viñas.
The first time Matteo saw her, she was alone in a bough of green, reading a script by the light of late afternoon. Elena had the kind of hands that had memorized every cadence of a theater life. They were both gentle and exacting. She was older than Matteo by several summers, her hair threaded with early silver, and her face bore the soft map of past triumphs and small sorrows. The narrator noted how she moved as if she belonged to several lifetimes of applause and departures. They spoke because Matteo asked a question about a line that had lodged in his chest. Conversation flowed into hours, about the danger of sentiment, the courage it takes to fail publicly, the way wine can cleanse a poet's throat. Elena's laugh, the narrator remembered, carried the warm salt of the sea. Matteo, inexperienced in the architecture of adult affection, mistook kindness for invitation. Elena, who had loved and been left as many times as a stage loses set pieces, recognized in Matteo a tender hunger for truth and a fear of commitment disguised as ambition.
Chapter 3. Rehearsals and reckonings.
The troupe set up a small production in the square beneath the church. Nights became a blur of rehearsed confessions and unguarded hours. Matteo found himself invited into the inner conversations of actors who used truth as a rehearsal space. Elena took him under a wing that was part maternal guardian and part complicit conspirator. He wrote scenes inspired by her gestures and the way she lit matches to warm her hands. His notebook filled with fragments of her voice like spilled ink. But intimacy, the narrator knew, is a negotiator. What Matteo wanted was a story that would last. What Elena wanted was a summer that could be honest without promising forever. As rehearsals sharpened the edges of their lives, Matteo misread a glance and misdated a promise in his head. The troupe's director, a practical man named Rocco with a temper that matched his appetite for life, warned Matteo of dramatizing what had not been shared. The young writer learned the painful difference between being seen and being known. Chapter 4, of Letters and Unplayed Scenes.
When the festival closed, the troupe dispersed like birds.
Elena was scheduled for a tour that would carry her across seas and into rooms with different lights. Before she left, Matteo wrote her a letter he would not give her. He folded pages into themselves, filling margins with apologies and boasts, with declarations he had yet to deserve. He feared that speaking might ruin the moment. He feared silence more. The narrator, who had seen many letters lost in drawers and read by others, followed Matteo as he hid the pages beneath a loose floorboard in the house above the market. Days later, driven by a courage sharpened by absence, Matteo decided to find Elena before her departure. He ran across the cobblestones to the small harbor where ferries coughed and gulls argued. He found her sitting on a crate, looking at a postcard of a city she planned to leave behind. They talked, not in the melodic cadence of rehearsed lines, but in the smaller, raw syllables of people trying to keep pace with their own yearnings. Elena loved the theater, Matteo learned. She loved audiences for the illusion of immortality they offered, but she also loved solitude in ways that surprised him. She confessed a fear of being fossilized inside someone else's story. Matteo listened, his earlier notions of romance receding like the tide, replaced by an understanding that sometimes love is an agreement to witness, not to possess.
Chapter 5, The Harvest.
Harvest came, and with it a season of communal work and sudden intimacy. The town gathered to pick grapes and make wine, a ritual that transformed labor into festival. Matteo joined in, his hands stained purple, the juice itself a kind of confession. In the evenings, villagers cooked and danced, and for a brief time the narrator observed, a kind of truce settled over hearts. Elena returned from a rehearsal short on sleep and long with what she had seen. She and Matteo found each other in the press of people, and the night stretched its patience for them. They walked among vines heavy with fruit, and spoke of possibility without binding themselves in promises. The narrator was precise in remembering how their fingers brushed in the dark, how the world reduced to breath and the distant clink of glasses. In the end, the wine did what it always did, it loosened truth. Elena admitted that she had been afraid of love because it asked her to trade freedom for continuity. Matteo admitted that he had feared being ordinary because it felt like forgetting himself. They did not decide everything that night. They did not pledge forever. What they did, as the narrator, a man who had seen many small mercies, valued as rare, was to accept one another's unfinished sentences.
Chapter 6. The Last Performance.
Autumn edged the town with coolness, and plans reasserted themselves. Elena would leave for a long tour. Matteo's manuscript, finally shaped by the weight of living, was accepted for a small run on a provincial stage. The troupe invited him to revise scenes. He worked at a small table while Elena rehearsed across the square. The narrator took pleasure in the way art began to mimic life, subtly, until one could no longer tell which was leading. The night of Matteo's first small premiere, the whole town came. Elena stood in the back, a silhouette among lanterns. The play, a modest thing of tenderness and risk, was met with quiet applause. After the curtain, they did not go to shout declarations. Instead, they walked where the vines met the road, under a sky that felt like a bowl filled with possibility. They promised each other less than they had once imagined, and more than the alphabet could contain, that they would carry the other's name gently, and know the shapes of absence as respectfully as presence. The narrator closed his notebook then, as if putting down a light. He had watched two people learn that love is not always a rescue, sometimes it is a steady keeping. Matteo and Elena parted at dawn, she to the ferry, he to a train, but the narrator knew the truth of such separations. Good stories, like good wine, are not consumed quickly. They linger, fermenting, altering the palate. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, give the video a like, leave a comment, and share the video.